I saw the cutest thing on this channel. At the end of the video, they had, like, it was a dictionary page, and they had engagement, verb, like, comment, subscribe. And I just thought that was the cutest thing. I'm not gonna do that, but I thought it was very cute. I'm not gonna do it because I don't steal other people's ideas. Unless it can be made into a dress, then I'm absolutely going to steal it, call it creative liberty or a design choice, and leave it at that. What up? We are making a lovely maroon, dark and stormy, vampire-y number today and tomorrow, and probably for the foreseeable future because I did not time manage myself well. As usual, I have a drawing that I'm working off of for this, and I also already have my fabric. I have a red organza that is so nice. I'm pretty sure it used to be curtains. I also have a green fabric that I'm using for the slip dress that goes underneath it. The only reason I'm using green is because I do not own any other stretch fabrics, and I wanted this to be stretchy. My plan is to build the slip dress, put a zipper in it, and then just drape and sew the overdress and organza right on top of that, so I don't actually have to do any flat patterning. So I do not have to do any flat patterning, because I've been doing a lot of that lately, and I thought it might be fun to do a, creative draping project that's very, go with the flow. Because that's me. I also have a feeling that I will probably be absolutely miserably creating, or peacefully, I don't know, it might be therapeutic or it might be frustrating to create all the little flowers that I plan on putting all over it. Those are just going to be out of black scraps of fabric though, so I've already got a bag of scraps for that. And there's not much else to do but get started with draping. Starting off with that green underlayer, I have this from a previous project that went wrong, so it actually already has some hemmed edges. I'm starting with the hemmed edges along the center front and center back of the dress and working my way out from there as I stretch it across the mannequin, pinning in place as I go, and being sure to keep in mind that this actually has to fit onto me, so I need to make sure I'm not stretching it to its full capacity. Once I've got it all laid out on the mannequin, I go ahead and take a Sharpie, since this is just the understructure of the dress and won't be seen, and I'm going to mark out where all of the cutting needs to happen. Then I take it to the floor and double up on the measurements, so I only did 1/2 of the dress on the mannequin. I'm doing the other half by pinning all along through both layers of the fabric where the Sharpie marks are, flipping it over, and tracing the Sharpie marks onto the backside. Then I'm cutting it out, leaving myself plenty of seam allowance for later. The first bit of this dress that I want to really take care of is the curved hems that I have to do, because I would rather do them sooner than later, because curved hems are the bane of my existence. But suffer we must to make beautiful things, and that includes doing all the curved hems for this dress. Lucky for me, the only curved hems I have to deal with on this dress are the armscye. Once those curved hems are taken care of, I go ahead and also take care of the darts that I added. These are the only thing that is adding shape to the dress besides the stretch of the fabric, because on the areas that are too small, I can always just stretch more fabric over it, but in the case of the bust, I needed to subtract fabric, so darts. And of course, because why not? It started snowing as I was doing this project, which is just great. I'm then going ahead and attaching. I'm attaching the two center front pieces of the dress together with a zigzag stitch because they are pre-hemmed, so I just need to squish the two hems right up against each other and sew them together. Alternatively, for the side seams of the dress, I will be doing a regular seam, pressing it open, folding it under, and sewing it down as a folded under seam, except the seam is going to be on the outside of the dress so that it is not resting against my body. Once I have the center front and the 2 side seams done, I can take a zipper and insert that up the back of the dress. This was definitely made easier by the fact that the dress already had pre-done hems on these 2 center back seams, so I just had to zigzag my zipper into there to make sure there were no edges sticking up. Last thing to do for this bit of the dress is to attach the 2 top shoulder seams. I'm just pinning these in place on the mannequin and then whip stitching them together real quick with a hand stitch because I just really didn't want to take it off the mannequin again. Then it's time for a quick try on.
This is better than expected. I'm constantly surprising myself with the fact that I actually know how to do this. The top's doing what I want it to. That's all I'm going to say on that. And then all the seams look pretty good. The zipper isn't puckering a lot, which is great because that's usually my problem with zippers, is that they pucker a lot. I like it overall for the underdress. The only bad thing is obviously this is very mini right now, just because of the length of fabric that I had to start with. So I think I'm going to try and just add I have some scraps that I'm going to try and kind of gerrymander into some sort of extension for this, just because I'm going to need it to act as almost a petticoat to give the overskirt just a little more shape. So go do that, and then I think we're ready to start on the red portion of the dress.
I was about to make my 4th cup of tea of the day, and I drink caffeinated tea with a lot of sugar in it, when I thought, maybe I should drink some water. But then I thought, I really don't want to drink water. So I compromised and chugged a glass of water reluctantly and then made a smoothie to reward myself. I'm so responsible. Now that the underdress is built, and I went ahead and added a little bit of black flouncy fabric to the bottom just to give it a little bit more length. I will, however, I think just be also wearing a pair of tights to make up for the fact that the underdress is so short. I can now move on to starting with the red organza. My first step was taking some basic measurements on crucial points around the circumference of my base dress and also the lengths from the underarm to the floor, from the highest point of the dress to the floor, and a couple of the mid points to the floor. And for the back of the dress, I also wanted to account for a train, and so I added, depending on where it hit, between 8 and 15 extra inches to my measurements. Once all that annoying and boring and awful and I really hate math is out of the way, I got started on marking out my fabric with chalk, and I am cutting this very large and in 4 separate pieces to drape and gather onto the mannequin, and that will be the body of the dress. I am also cutting out 2 sets of sleeves. One set goes as the undersleeve, and the other set goes as the oversleeve, which is the puffy part that was in the design. The puffy part will be tacked onto the undersleeve at certain points just to hold the puffs where I want them. And also the undersleeve means that I won't have any itchy seams from the oversleeve poking at me, because I cannot stand to have itchy sleeve seams, even if I finish them off. I just don't want anything from that outer sleeve touching me. Before we can begin draping the dress, we actually have to put the sleeves on first so that all of our work with the sleeves gets hidden underneath the draping. For the undersleeves, I am doing a French seam, which is a seam that is turned around on itself and has no raw edges. This will guarantee that I have no seams sticking into my arms, and my little sensory self will be happy. Once we have the seam of the sleeves done up, I can then pin it directly onto my underdress and begin hand sewing them on. After they've been sewn on, it's time for a quick try on to cut the length of the sleeves.
Alright, these sleeves are actually pretty good for undersleeves. They don't pull on it in any weird way that would cause a slip. And then I went ahead and put some just black stuff on the bottom, and I figure I'll wear tights under it as well just to be sure. But it's not terrible. I do have to hem these up because I made them way too long. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark where I want them to end on my wrists. Yeah, I think I want the sleeves to be a little longer than your average sleeve. I want it to go just below the wrist instead of just on top of the wrist. So just finding where my wrist is and then moving about a ½ inch below that, I think. And that looks pretty even to me. So I'm going to go ahead and hem these up and get started on the oversleeves.
Now that our inner sleeves have been completed, cut down to size, and hemmed up, we can begin on the outer sleeve portions. Like the inner sleeve, I am just seaming up the outer sleeve with a French seam real quick. Then I am dividing the sleeve up into rings and using gathering stitches, or the highest stitch on my machine with no back stitching, to divvy up the puffs. Then I can start pulling on my gathering stitches and puffing it up. I feel like there's a song that goes with that. Puff. What song? My mind is saying the Powerpuff Girls theme, but I don't know that because I never watched the Powerpuff Girls growing up. It'll come to me. Once the puffs have been started, and the gathering threads have been gathered up but not tied off, we can then transfer that sleeve onto the mannequin, pulling it right over our inner sleeve and pinning in place around the arm's eye. Once pinned in place, I will sew up all around the arm's eye to keep the sleeve in place. Then I can begin tacking the puffs of the outer sleeve onto the inner sleeve to keep them in place. I am making sure that the last puff meets up with my wrist and has a clean finished edge. Then, after connecting all of my panels for the main dress into one super panel, making sure to leave a gap at the front and back for the low neckline and the zipper, I can begin gathering it up and pleating it up into sort of... I'm really just scrunching this, guys. You can't say gathering or pleating about this. It's a mess, but it works. Doing that all along the top of the dress at different intervals, and I have used so many pins on this that I ran out of pins, so I had to go ahead and stitch that down, take out all my pins, and get started again. There is not going to be machine sewing from here on out, really, because it is just hand stitching this onto the green dress. Once everything is attached at the top and the dress just sort of looks like one giant tunic potato sack bag, I need to gather up and pin along the bodice to give it some shape. Doing the same on the front and the back. And during this process, I'm making sure to pin only to the dress and not to my mannequin so that it can be removed and I can do my hand sewing while I sit down, instead of scrunched over my mannequin and accidentally sewing my dress to my mannequin, because I've never been stupid enough to do that before. As I am hand sewing this, I'm also making sure to use a thread identical to the fabric so that it won't show through. Once all the hand sewing is done, I am wetting down the dress with water and using an iron to hold those pleats in place. Because I used a synthetic fabric for this, it reacts really well to getting wet and being reset with heat. I also got very lazy at one point and just started using a hairdryer. And once all that deliciously tedious tacking and ironing and pleating is done, I can start on our fun little flowers. This is done by taking loads and loads of my scrap organza that is red, and then also some scrap organza black that I had around, and using fire. Me? A pyro? No. Normally, when I do things with fire, I just use a lighter, but because this has to be such a long process, I'm just going ahead and using some candles. Taking my organza circles that I have cut out, I am using a pin in the middle of them so that I don't have to get my fingers too near the flame, holding it over the flame just until the edges are singed, and because this is a synthetic fabric, it does not catch fire. It melts and beads into a plastic hard edge on the flowers, which keeps them from fraying and causes them to curl up into a flower shape. And I definitely overestimated how many I would need for this project, but I'm not complaining about how many flowers I now have. Then, because I like to complicate things for myself, the night before we left to shoot this dress, I decided, oh my gosh, what if it had like black bleeding up into it from the bottom because I have black flowers? Wouldn't that be so cool? Pardon the voice just leaving in the middle of this. Wow. So I then proceeded to stay up way later than I should have and painted/dyed the end of the dress black. And I say painted/dyed because I didn't have black dye, so I mixed black paint and purple dye to get what I got. To make sure it ombres well, I did wet the dress first, and also I am using a spray bottle on the parts that I want to fade up from black to red, and a paintbrush on the bottom for the parts that I want to be solid black. Once my ombre effect was done, I can start attaching the flowers. I started doing this just with a needle and thread, and then started doing it with wire also, and I decided I liked the way the wire looked better, and I went ahead and just started attaching my little flowers as the fancy took me. And finally, this behemoth of a project was finished, and it's time for the reveal. When I tell you that I was so unsure about this project, but I'm so happy with how it came out. I don't usually do original designs when I build things just because I feel like it's, I don't get as much from them as often, but I'm really happy with how this one came out. Usually I'll have some source material or some historical piece that I'm working off of, or it'll be a study of like a certain decade or something. But this was just something I thought was really pretty and I wanted to do. And I am so happy that I took the time to actually make it. If I had to change anything about this dress, I probably would have spent a little more money on it, but that's kind of the same with every project. The one thing I didn't like is my green underdress was really, really short. And while I think that did lend itself to like, ooh, the sheer skirtness of it, it was cool, but also, I still wore shorts under it because I was like, that's kind of much. So if I could have had a better underdress, that would have been great, but I was using recycled materials, so, what can you do? For things that I really liked about this process, all the like fun experimental stuff with the gathering and heating it and using the fire for the flowers and the dye process. It was all just a lot of fun just to try things just because, hey, it might look cool. So I enjoyed doing that, and I think maybe I should do that more often. Just think, oh, this might look cool. I also really liked the way we filmed the reveal. I actually had someone help me this time. Me and one of my roommates went on a road trip recently, and we stopped at some state parks. Having someone else there to help me film was such a huge difference and made me feel so much more relaxed about the filming process. And so as often as possible, from now on, if I can, I want someone else there to help me film, because I think it just made it so much better. And it made me feel so much better about it. As for new projects, I can't spoil anything right now. If you do want spoilers, they are on Patreon. I tend to post designs and things quite a lot on there, just because I don't really think to post them on other social media sites. I usually only like finished projects to make it to my TikTok and Instagram. As always, thank you for watching. I'm so happy you took some time out of your day to spend it with me. I wish you all the luck on any future projects you might be having. If you'd like to see more of what I do, and possibly some behind-the-scenes content, as well as things that just don't make it onto YouTube, I have a TikTok, Instagram, Patreon, Venmo, and Amazon wishlist, all linked in my bio. As always, I'd like to give a shout out to all of my members on Patreon. Thank you so much for your support. It helps a lot with paying for the projects. My handle on all these platforms is @artbylgo, and you can also find me at artbylgo.com, where I have a gallery of my work, as well as some paintings for sale, since painting is something that I don't do as a main part of my costuming content, but it is something that I greatly enjoy and am actually trained in. I'm just gonna say it again, I'm so unbelievably happy with this project, and I hope you liked it as well. Let me know in the comments what you might like to see from me in the future. I'm always open to trying new ideas, and bye! Words. I filmed all of this within like an hour of each other. How has the light changed this much? The sun is my friggin' enemy. I didn't mean that, baby. Please keep shining, it's so cold. Noish.
Hey, don't spin yourself into the water!